If we can't maneuver, if we can't fall back to better positions, they'll destroy us piece by piece. The Führer had taken his sleeping medication the night before. He never woke before 10, often not until 11. Anyone who disturbed him faced an explosion of rage that could end careers, or worse. 36 hours after hitting Omaha Beach, exhausted and still shaking from the landing, they were about to meet their allies, face to face. "Hold fire," Morrison called softly. "They're ours." "Well, theirs. You know what I mean." The British patrol moved closer. Morrison stood, raised his hand. The lead British soldier, a lieutenant by his insignia, stopped, studied Morrison's group, then walked forward with his rifle slung. He was young, maybe 23, with a thin mustache and an expression of careful neutrality. 29th Infantry?" the British officer asked. His accent made the words sound clipped, formal. "That's right," Morrison said. "You're from Gold Beach." 50th Division. "We're meant to link up with your chaps around Port-en-Bessin." He glanced at the smoke rising from the direction of Omaha. "Rough go yesterday?" Morrison thought of the beach, the bodies in the surf, the 6 hours of hell before they'd finally gotten off the sand. "Yeah," he said. "Rough." The British lieutenant nodded once, as if Morrison had confirmed something he already knew. "Right then. We're pushing toward Bayous. Your command know we're in the area." "They do now," Morrison said. The lieutenant smiled slightly. Not quite friendly, not quite distant. "Good show. Carry on." He turned to his men, said something Morrison couldn't hear, and the patrol moved past, heading west. Morrison watched them go. His corporal, Eddie Hayes from Brooklyn, came up beside him. "That's it. That's the British." "What were you expecting?" "I don't know. More British, I guess. They look just like us." "Different helmets," Morrison said. "Different uniforms. Did you see their rifles?" "Lee Enfields," Hayes said. "My dad carried one in the last war. Said they're good guns. Just slow. Bolt action." Morrison nodded. The British were moving through the hedgerows with careful precision, each man covering the next, their spacing perfect. Professional. Controlled. "They look like they know what they're doing." "So do we," Hayes said, but there was a question in his voice. Morrison didn't answer. He was thinking about Omaha Beach, about the chaos and terror and desperate scrambling. These British troops moved like they were on parade, even here, even now. It was different. He couldn't say if it was better or worse, just different. By mid-morning, Morrison's platoon had moved 2 miles inland and encountered British forces 3 more times. Each encounter followed a similar pattern: careful identification, brief exchange, continuation. The British were polite, efficient, and utterly unruffled by the war happening around them. It was starting to unnerve the Americans. Private First Class Tommy Chen, a radio man from San Francisco, put it into words during a break in a farmyard. "They're too calm," he said, watching a British squad brew tea, in the ruins of a barn while German artillery rumbled in the distance. "Don't they know we're in a war?" The British had set up a small stove, produced tea from somewhere, and were passing around metal cups while their sergeant studied a map. One of them was smoking a pipe. A pipe. Morrison had seen men smoke cigarettes under fire, sure, but a pipe suggested leisure time, contemplation, a Sunday afternoon. "Maybe that's just how they are," Morrison said. "It's weird," Chen insisted. "We're all jumping at every sound, and they're having a tea party." A British soldier, a corporal, stocky and middle-aged, overheard and walked over, cup in hand. "Fancy a brew?" he asked, offering the tea to Chen. Chen took it, sniffed it suspiciously. "Is this really tea?" "Course it's tea. What else would it be?" "I don't know. Medicine? Fuel?" The British corporal laughed, a short bark of amusement. "You Yanks and your coffee. Can't function without it, can you? We're the same with tea. Keeps you steady. He tapped his temple. Settles the nerves. Chen sipped the tea, made a face. It's hot. That's rather the point. Morrison accepted a cup when it was offered. The tea was strong, bitter, nothing like the sweet iced tea his mother made back in Virginia. But it was hot, and the British corporal was right. There was something steadying about it, about the ritual of stopping, brewing, drinking, continuing. The British had been at war for 5 years now. Maybe this was how you survived that long. You made tea, you kept routines, you stayed human. How long you been fighting? Morrison asked the corporal. Since 1940. Dunkirk, North Africa, Sicily, now here. The corporal said it flatly, without pride or complaint, just facts. You? 2 days. The corporal studied Morrison's face, then nodded. You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, keep your head down and your rifle clean. He finished his tea, collected his cup, and returned to his squad. Hayes leaned close to Morrison. 4 years of combat, and he's brewing tea in a barn. Either they're crazy or we are. Maybe both, Morrison said. The differences became more apparent as the day wore on. Morrison's platoon was attached to a British company for a push toward a crossroads 2 miles south. The British captain, a tall, thin man named Pemberton, briefed the combined force with the same tone Morrison's high school principal had used when explaining detention policy. Calm, measured, slightly bored. The objective is this crossroads, Pemberton said, pointing at his map. Jerry's got a machine gun position here, possibly a mortar team here. We'll advance in 2 columns, suppress the machine gun, and clear the position. Questions? Morrison raised his hand. What if they've got more than 1 machine gun? Then we'll suppress both, Pemberton said, as if this were obvious. The key is to maintain formation and not bunch up. Jerry loves it when you bunch up. Makes his job easier. Morrison had a dozen more questions. What about flanking fire? What about reinforcements? What about artillery support? But Pemberton had already moved on, issuing orders to his platoon leaders with the same unhurried precision. The British soldiers listened, nodded, checked their weapons with practiced efficiency. No one seemed nervous. No one seemed excited. They just seemed ready. The American platoon leader, Lieutenant Kowalski, pulled Morrison aside. What do you think? I think they've done this before, Morrison said. So have we. Not like this. Not 4 years' worth. Kowalski frowned. You think we should follow their lead? Morrison considered. The British approach was methodical, careful, almost cautious. The American way, at least how they'd been trained, was to hit hard and fast, overwhelm the enemy with aggression and firepower. Different philosophies, different experiences. I think we should watch and learn, Morrison finally said. The advance began at noon. The British moved forward in textbook formation, each squad covering the next, using every bit of cover. They moved slowly, too slowly, Morrison thought at first. His instinct was to rush, to get across the open ground quickly, but the British took their time, and as they moved, Morrison began to see why. They never exposed themselves unnecessarily. They used the terrain perfectly. When they encountered resistance, they didn't charge forward. They stopped, assessed, brought up support weapons, and suppressed the enemy position before advancing. It was like watching a machine operate, each part moving in coordination with the others.